I'm Gene Grant here at the table with this week's Line Opinion panelists, starting with Daniel Foley, former House Minority Whip. Former State Senator Janice Arnold-Jones is back with us. Laura Sanchez-Rivey from Sanchez Legal Solutions is here. And Sophie Martin, an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Let's start with this week's discussion with the news that former State Senator Phil Griego is apparently still using campaign funds even though he stepped down earlier this year amid allegations of some serious ethics violations during his time in the legislature. Now, Dan, Mr. Griego told the New Mexico Political Report that his spending was to serve his constituents and that they are still his constituents. Are they still his constituents?
Well, first, let me just say one thing to you, Gene. I want to correct you that Janice was a representative, and since we were undefeated in the House-Senate basketball game, and she was a very important part of those victories,
very important
she
correction.
would want to make sure
That's
she's
right.
on the winning side of that.
That's
so.
right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, the word is that he's running again, right? There's been talk that he's going to seek that seat again.
'Cause I thought he was saying he wasn't going to. He'd be too old.
You know, it's interesting if you read the New Mexico Political Journal, he was interviewed and said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And then, like, called back and said, wait a minute, let me restate this.
I see.
I'm not saying I won't. And so, what I think he could come out and say is what defines a candidate. You know, I'm thinking about running. I want to run again. He's got this pack, so he could use that. It would have been much easier if he wasn't going to run to just create a pack and say, I'm going to advocate on behalf of that. I mean, he could start a pack for the districts, the constituents of that Senate district. Right. But, you know, as you know, Gene, and we've all pontificated for years on this table, you know, most rules of common sense fly out the window when you start dealing with legislators in Santa Fe and what's happening up there. So, you know, it's no surprise. But I think if he's going to run again, you know, he's getting a ton of earned media.
That's
you
one
know,
way to
he's
look
not
at it,
having
I
to pay for.
suppose.
Well, but you know what? You look at some of those areas up there.
Yeah.
You know, they've historically reelected folks that have been in trouble, you know, over the years, and so, you know, I think, you know what they say, Gene. You know, as long as they spell your name right, just keep your name in the media.
There you go. But how? On top of that, Representative, sorry about that, not state senator. He has made it pretty clear that, look, you know, I'm paying rent on an office. I'm paying consultants, I'm paying all these other people, as if his machine is still running. Now, most of us would think the machine has stopped. The keys have been taken out of the ignition. It's over. Why isn't this clear in our Secretary of State's purview here? We'll talk about her in a little bit in this segment as well, by the way. But why isn't it clear to legislators that once it's over, it's fundamentally over?
Well, I want you to know that 95% of the legislators understand that
it was over for me.
It was over.
Okay.
It's over.
Right.
You know, and the gray areas. Okay, so as a senator, had he taken a contract that didn't expire, that is considered legitimate.
Meaning
Okay.
his rent.
His rent. And if he wanted to hire a consultant, you could argue that he's thinking about running. But he has no constituents because he's not elected.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And to suggest that he can use money for constituent services or constituent meetings,
Right.
all you have to do is read the rules. There are only 7. And it's not hard.
Right.
But 95% of the legislators get this.
My constituents are in the Bahamas, so I'm going to raise money to travel there in the winter to see my
I'm sure it's been tried. I'm sure it's been tried.
Hire me as your constituent.
This will be my legal team, my demographics team, and away we're going, Gene.
Neat guy, nice guy, everyone knows him, he's been around for a long time, but it came across as a little flip in some of the reporting about, you know, I'm still the king here. I'm still the kingmaker. I have constituents who have problems. Isn't this supposed to be a clean handoff of power? Isn't that how our system is supposed to work?
I think they're supposed to be, yeah. I think that unfortunately too many, you know, and it's going to sound terrible to say this, but I think there's a lot of people in the state that have a hard time letting go. You know, they feel like they've been in this position and somehow they've, you know, it's their identity more so than than their responsibility and their role in terms of being a public servant. And I think that's something we really need to, you know, push back on.
Right.
Because, you know, for me, raising money in this way for campaigns, you're really in a trust position. You know, you have fiduciary responsibility to use that money for the campaign, the way it's you know, spelled out in the statutes, and the particular statute that applies here is pretty clear. I mean, it's very broad in terms of just saying, you know, campaign uses or whatever, and that's where I think a lot of legislators use their own discretion, and that's sort of a separate issue. But in terms of whether you can use the funds for anything other than a campaign, or you know, using leftover funds to pay off debt or to give to a nonprofit, something like that, or to another campaign, it's pretty clear. I mean, you don't have constituents. So the fact that he's still in terms of an identity, referring to the people in his community as his constituents, I think is fundamentally flawed.
Right.
Those are no longer his constituents. They may be his friends, colleagues, and people he cares about very deeply.
That's right.
But he shouldn't be using campaign funds for
And
that.
they may be people he's trying to get the vote for in the next election, but they're not his constituents.
Right,
Right.
exactly right. Sophie, you know, this idea that Dan came out with, not idea, but he's reading that Mr. Griego's thinking about running again. It seems like that's a way to create an instant gray cloud, like a gray area suddenly. Are you a candidate or are you not? So let's just back up until you make a decision about what to do with the money.
My sense of the dynamic actually is that he spoke truth first and then realized that that was not
Right.
going to serve his situation. I think one of the most interesting things about what's happening with Griego is that this comes in the context of a much what seems to be a much less ambiguous situation with Secretary of State Duran. You know, this is a topic that's really in the news every day right now. Diana Duran is expected to appear in a hearing on Friday today.
that's right.
And we hope to learn more about that. But this is so top of mind that you would think that legislators would be running to their rule books and saying, okay, let me double check myself here. I believe I'm doing it right, but let me make sure I'm doing it right.
That's right. Representative, speaking of which, Secretary of State Diana Duran, Sophie just mentioned, is Friday today, as a matter of fact, going over some new rules of the road, so to speak. And there's a little bit of a heartburn out there that, in fact, should she be in the process, should she not be? Or, in fact, and they have said that these changes were in process before her troubles began. But your sense of the situation of credible changes coming from the Secretary of State if she's still holding office with this cloud over her?
Well, I would say we can focus just on the Secretary. And remember, it is an office, it's not an individual.
Right.
The changes that are being proposed are not new.
Okay.
I mean, and you would think that common sense says, based on these 7 little rules, that massages are not
All right.
It's a stressful thing running for office.
that we would not have to create a list of things that are prohibited.
Right.
And of course, the more you specify what's prohibited, what's included also broadens, which is an interesting phenomenon.
Sure.
Knowing the rulemaking process and knowing, having sat on voters and elections, this has been in process. If she perceives that she is tainting it by sitting there, then she needs to stay out of the rulemaking process. But her office needs to pursue it. We need to pursue it. None of the rules that they're suggesting are new.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the office still has to function.
Yeah.
Whether she's there or not, the office
Ken
still has to
Ortiz has
function.
been all over the news. He's
And
close all over the
there's
place.
staff people there that are doing the stuff. I mean, Friday's going to be a big day today. When folks are watching the show today, it was going to be a big day because it's the preliminary hearing. So my prediction is that if a deal's not cut, it's going to go the full length. My prediction is that something will happen prior to the court date that I think
Right.
she'll resign and move away because, on the heels of this Phil Griego stuff, this stuff, as everybody said, is in the media so much. The last thing I would want to do is be in front of 12 angry New Mexicans explaining what I did with money that I should have been using somewhere else
Right.
and splitting hairs over, well, it wasn't 30,000, it was only 13, and it wasn't this, it wasn't that. And so I think come the end of the day, I think you're going to see Diana Duran prior to Friday exit, which is the right thing to do for her, for the state of New Mexico, for everybody. And the big question then is going to be, who's going to replace her as the Secretary of State, because the governor will make that appointment, and that's going to be a unique conversation. Is it an office holder? People have to remember how important the Secretary of State's office is going into a presidential election. I mean, you're going to have someone that's got. So do you put an office holder in? Do you get somebody that says, I am not running, I'm here to do a good job, or do you go and get somebody that says, I want to give them a leg up, give them a year and a half in this deal, and let them run? So that's going to be the next big battle lines that are drawn, I think, to see who that person is. And I'm not sure that we may not be talking to someone who could possibly be filling that seat.
That's true, too.
Sitting here across the table from
true,
us,
too.
and the former representative as the next Secretary of State, possibly.
Oh, well.
But
She has the book
She's
already.
got the book. That's why I'm
I
saying.
have the book.
She
But
knows more about the book than anybody.
But you make a very good point, and what could be lost in this is the changes, the rulemaking changes.
Yeah.
We have been demanding it. I think Vicki Harrison at Common Cause has been trying to get this done. So are we going to allow, one, it's unfortunate, but worse than that, partisanship to deep six something that I think everybody has said, we really need to get this done.
Interesting. Up next, Senator Tom Udall talks about his proposal to increase oversight of federal regulations for chemicals.